Man, it's been so long since I turned on one of these mics. I have to remember how to do it. It is 4:02. See if I've got the right script here. Okay, here we go. Sorry, I have to find the proper script. Good afternoon and welcome to the Audit Committee meeting of the Dallas Independent School District Board of Trustees. Please stand and join us for a moment of silence and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance and salute to the Texas flag. The following committee members are in attendance. Trustee Dustin Marshall, District 2, Trustee Maxie Johnson, District 5, also in attendance. Thank you very much for being here. Our non-voting members, Tony Stevens and Chris Lewis. There aren't any other trustees here so far, but they will be glad to join us when they do. Our Superintendent of Schools, Michael Hinojosa, joins us by Zoom.
I am here. Yeah.
Hi, Doc. And I'm Edwin Flores, Committee Chair. And I have to read this statement. On March 16th, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings laws to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus COVID-19. In accordance with these suspended rules, we certified the following. Notice of this meeting has been posted online for at least 72 hours. Although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, which actually today we are, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting. We are attending, some of us, by use of Zoom meeting software application, will allow us two-way communication for members of the public. Members of the public will follow the instructions on the meeting notice for registering to speak. During the public comment portion, will be allowed to address the board for 3 minutes if physically present or unmuted for 3 minutes to speak. I don't think we have any speakers. All other meeting procedures will adhere to board-adopted procedures to the extent practicable. An audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public. We apologize in advance for any unforeseen difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. If you have questions about these suspended laws, please contact the Office of the Attorney General at 888-672-6787 or by email at TOMA, that is TOMA, at oag.texas.gov. I just mentioned that our public agenda includes a speaking segment, but there's nobody here to speak. So the first action is to consider and take possible action to approve the minutes of September 17, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 17, 2020?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Are there any corrections? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. So we have adopted the minutes of September 17, 2020. The next item is item B, report on the 2019-2020 E-rate performance audit by Lupe Garcia, partner of Whitney Penn. All right. Come on into the Thunderdome. Just a little talking face.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Members of the committee, my name is Lupe Garcia. I'm a partner with Whitley Penn. We were engaged to perform the 2019-2020 E-rate performance audit of the district's administration of the E-rate program. In order to complete this audit, we had to meet with various individuals, perform inquiries and interviews. A lot of our test work was performed remotely, as you can imagine. A lot of the supporting documentation was provided electronically for us to review from our offices. The testing of the equipment and the verification of the assets did have to take place in person. So we did have to go to campuses throughout the district to see that those E-rate equipment was indeed where the district's record said they would be. And then the testing of the internet security for the district's compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act was also done on-site in person. Our report documents the scope of the performance audit, our approach, and the procedures we performed. And it also includes some observations and recommendations that we identified as a result of the procedures we performed. Those observations and recommendations are in section 4 of our report, and I'll go over those now. We did include, which was a repeat observation from our previous performance audit, that the E-rate compliance officer had not taken the USAC sponsored training. USAC has not, since our last report, given that training, so it has not been possible. Nonetheless, it is in the district's policy that he does attend this training once every funding year, and so management's response indicates that the fact that USAC hasn't provided this training, and they'll attend the training the next available opportunity. We also selected a random sample of E-rate personnel that are required to take annual training. That sample was 40 individuals. Of those 40, 2 did not take the training. Those 2 individuals also did not submit and sign their required forms. We brought that to management's attention. They said they knew that those individuals had missed the training. Their response is that they would be more diligent in escalating matters when they do identify E-rate personnel that have not taken the training for whatever reason. I believe these particular individuals either were out sick that day or there were other scheduling conflicts, and just the follow-up needed to take place in order for the training to be taken. We also identified some corrections that management had to make to its E-rate asset database system. We selected 111 E-rate assets to test. Of those 111, we identified 40 instances that we needed to bring to management's attention. 31 of those were a clerical data entry type error where the wrong funding request number was entered into the system for that particular piece of equipment. And then there were another 9 assets that the location was not accurate in the database versus where we ultimately found the item. So management made those corrections for those assets and for what those that we brought to their attention. Those were the 3 observations, the 3 recommendations, and management's responses are documented in the report. If y'all have any questions about the performance audit, the scope of our procedures, or our observations, or management's recommendation, I can take those questions at this time.
Trustee Marshall.
So I've been on the audit committee for a couple of years, and this is the highest error rate I've seen in one of these audits. I can't recall the exact numbers, but I think it was low single digits on a percentage basis of the assets reviewed in the previous couple of years, and you found 40 out of 111 with problems. I mean, that's obviously an extremely high percentage. I'm wondering what the administration attributes that to, and what's different from previous year's audits. We seem to have gone in the wrong direction, and I'm curious what's happening.
Good afternoon, Jack Kalanick, Chief Technology Officer, and thank you for the opportunity. So I can understand the appearance that the number is bigger, but it's actually, for 31 of the 40 cases, it's a single data entry error. So if you're entering the data for these 40 attributes or assets or components, and you mistake it once, and you take it across the entire spreadsheet, that's what happened. So I think it is unlike some prior year fundings where the device was missing or it was misplaced or not in the right room. But as you can see from the finding, that wasn't the case here. So again, even though the number's bigger, I think the overall impact, it's a very minor issue. It's just a data error, data entry error.
But even if we called that one error, that's 9 plus 1 is 10 out of 111. That's still 9%, which is way higher than it was last year. So even
Understood.
The 9 assets in the wrong rooms is a big problem. So what's different?
Understood, and the point's well taken. Our response plan is to review all of our procedures and processes, retrain the people that are involved in this particular process. We do have some new players, and we are adding capacity in that side of our business in terms of additional resources to make sure that we are doing our due diligence with these assets.
Jack, are you doing physical counts outside of this audit process?
That does occur, but I think it happens through a different department. That's not my department that does it. I think that's the asset management department, which is part of finance.
So how frequently is that occurring, do we know?
I couldn't respond to that, but maybe the finance team, someone may know that answer. How frequently would they do the proactive audits? I think it's annually.
Right, so that's done through risk management, and they do that, a full review annually, but they do spot checks periodically, especially when we have orders coming in. So they do check spot check periodically, but they do a full review annually.
All right, I think we just need to, as the administration, I think needs to be, sort of elevate their sensitivity to this, because we were in E-rate jail for a long time, and, this may not seem like these were meaningful errors, but on a percentage basis, I don't want the feds to be raising their eyebrows at this. So, if I don't know if we need to increase that physical count to quarterly, or, do some sort of inventory count more frequently, but, this is concerning. This trends in the wrong direction in the last 4 or 5 years, so, let's be proactive about getting on top of it. That's all I got. Thanks.
Trustee Johnson, Mr. Lewis, Trustee Stevens. I saw Trustee Joyce Foreman has joined us online as well. Trustee Foreman, do you have any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Trustee Mitchke is on as well? Yeah, we don't see you unless you speak, so just let us know that you're here, and if you have any questions, just holler. Okay, well, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, we'll move on to agenda item C, which is consider and take possible action to review and recommend to the full Board of Trustees approval of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2020, including a report by the district's external auditors, Weaver and Tidwell LLP, regarding the 2019-2020 fiscal year audit. Jennifer Ripka, CPA, Partner Assurance Services, and Claire Wooten, CPA, Senior Management, oh, there they are, Assurance Services. So trustees, I guess we need to take a motion to have the discussion.
So moved.
So I have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, so it's on the table. So if y'all want to go through the presentation.
Me first, I just want to publicly thank Jennifer and her team with Weaver. This is a tough timeline to get through with COVID, and we did receive a waiver from TEA, so we could have extended, but we went through the process to meet the deadlines for the typical presentation for the board. And so I just wanted to publicly thank Weaver, and specifically Jennifer and her team, for assisting us and getting us to the deadline that you normally see. So I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, trustees. So excited to be here in person. Unlike some of our audits, a lot of them we're doing via Zoom. And I will get started, go through the introductions, auditor communications. Claire's going to jump in and go through the general fund, financial highlights, and then we'll move on to questions. Like in previous years, we have an appendix piece of this slide deck. We've moved a lot of that information to the appendix so that we don't spend a considerable amount of time going through a lot of the information. But please stop me if you have any questions, and I can go through it further. So our shameless plug of Weaver. We're a national firm with a local touch. We provide advisory services, assurance services, and tax services. We're a top 35 firm nationwide, and we're a best of best firm 2020. Our government practice in particular, we specialize in education. We're the auditor of more public school districts in the state than any other public accounting firm. We do the 5 largest districts in the state. And we have a focused government practice. Our audit practice is the largest industry practice within the firm. We have over 120 government audit professionals. We provide CPE to our clients. And Claire and I both are on the special review committee for the GFOA. So we're consistently looking at CAFRs and reviewing those. And so we bring that expertise to the district. My name is Jennifer Ripka, and I have been working in public accounting for 13 years. I've been on this engagement for several years, but this is my first year solo as the partner on this engagement. Prior to that, we had Jerry Gaither on the engagement. But with the rotation, I've come on and so brought on some differences in how I typically test on my audits, and so a little bit of fresher eyes. I'm also the K through 12 education practice leader, and then I also have Claire Wooten here with me. She's been on the engagement before. She worked as the senior on the engagement several years ago, took a break from the district's audit, and then she's back as the senior manager. The audit process, we perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as generally accepted government auditing standards. We perform the single audit in accordance with the uniform guidance. And then we do compliance testing outside of federal financial assistance. And that would include looking at procurement, PFIA, as well as TA state compliance requirements. As Dwayne mentioned, this year has been challenging for not only us as auditors, but also most of our school districts. We, here at this district, we had the tornadoes at the beginning of the year. We had House Bill 3 that went into effect. You had the pandemic, which included, state funding changes, as well as the ESSER funds that flow through the district. So a lot of moving parts. And we're going to take a moment to thank the district staff because, as Dwayne mentioned, we were doing this remotely, but still trying to push through and make it to the deadline. And so thanks to them and all their hard work, and we really do appreciate that. We issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That's a clean opinion. It's the highest level of assurance that can be placed on a set of financial statements. We also have the independent auditor's report on internal controls over financial reporting and compliance, as it is in accordance with government auditing standards. And there were no significant deficiencies and no material weaknesses in that report. This is the first year that we've been doing the audit that's been the case. So kudos to the team and having no significant deficiencies and no material weaknesses this year. We also issued the independent auditor's report on compliance with regards to the federal financial assistance under uniform guidance, and we issued an unmodified opinion and no findings with regards to that. I'll really skip through. We also, you all should have access to the letter to those charged with governance, and then also the management letter. There were 2 recommendations in the management letter, which is actually less than the prior year as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire and let her go through the general fund financial highlights.
So first of all, this slide shows you the fiscal 20 fund balance in the general fund in comparison to the fiscal 19 fund balance of the general fund in a pie chart format. So your total general fund balance was $869.4 million in fiscal 20, broken up by an unspendable or non-spendable, assigned fund balance, or unassigned fund balance. The next slide. The fund balance, like I said, totaled $869 million, which was an increase of $156.4 million. And this was as a result of the revenues exceeding the expenditures by $156.5 million. But also there were net transfers from other funds of $2.3 million, proceeds from the sale of assets of $600,000, and then a net of the extraordinary items, so uses in resources that totaled a negative $3 million.
And that extraordinary items, that relates to the tornado.
And then your unassigned fund balance, so that is the portion of fund balance that really can be used for anything, increased it increased from 590.8 million in fiscal 19 to 661.8 million in fiscal 20, which is approximately 46% of your current year general fund expenditures for fiscal 20. And then your assigned fund balance also increased in fiscal 20, and that was primarily due to the outstanding encumbrances at June 30th, 2020, for those items that could not be received, could not be expensed in fiscal 20 that had been previously budgeted for, that needed to move over to the fiscal 21 budget. So those were subsequently provided for in the 21 budget. And then your general fund budget and actual comparison. Your general fund actual revenues exceeded budgeted revenues by 38.4 million. So actual exceeded the budgeted. And that was really because of state aid and tax revenue, which were more than budget. And then your general fund budgeted expenditures exceeded your actual expenditures. So your budgeted was far more than those that were actually expensed. And that was by 121.1 million. And that's really because of POs and other projects that could not be completed like I just talked about in fiscal 20 that had been previously budgeted for. And then your general fund also had a favorable budget variance of 166.9 million.
So I'm going to pause there. Any questions with regards to that?
Any questions? Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, we will go through the two recommendations. The very first one, this one in particular, we identified two bond office invoices, and that totaled $1.1 million. And in this situation, these invoices were for expenditures that were incurred in 2020. And so we would have expected the expense to hit 2020, but there also to be an accrual associated with it because it hadn't yet been paid. The district at the bond office had implemented a new automated accrual process system during the fiscal year. And with that process, it actually hit cash instead of accrued liabilities during the course of that automated process. And so cash was understated by the 1 million, and then liabilities was also understated. So it's essentially, a reclass between the two. There's no missing cash or things like that, but you want to make sure that it gets in the correct bucket. And so the district has looked at that policy, that process, and now they know that they have to take it a step further and move it from that cash line item to the accrual. The second one related to bus additions, and so we get information from both the bond office as it relates to construction in progress, and then also the fixed asset or accounting services with regards to just capital assets in general. We noted that that $8.9 million in buses was included in both schedules. And so when we got it, additions were inflated by that $8.9 million. That's at the government-wide level. So it's, $8.9 million is a lot, but when you're looking at the statements as a whole, it's not as significant as it may seem. But we walk through the process of ensuring that it's not included on both going forward. And so within y'all's packets, you have management's responses to that and what they're going to be doing going forward as far as who's in charge of that, as well as when it's going to be completed too. Follow up on prior year items. So we had several items that were included in the management letter from prior years. And I won't go through each one of these, but we noted during the course of our follow-ups that all of those items had been taken care of, and the district had moved forward with what they said that they were going to do in the prior year management letter responses. So each one of those we noted were in good shape. So like I said before, in this appendix piece, lots of information about the audit process, what we do specifically. Each one of the major funds is included in there, information about it, as well as the non-major funds. So snapshots of each one of those funds so that you all can see it. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you all, so ask any questions.
Great. Any questions, trustee?
No, I just got my package, so I need to study this.
Okay, absolutely.
I just got it today, actually.
Okay, anyone? Great, well, thank you very, very much. So we've already made a motion, and the motion has been seconded to recommend the full Board of Trustees approval of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2020, including a report by the district's external auditors, Weaver and Tidwell LLP, regarding the 2019-2020 fiscal year audit. Trustees, if there's no discussion, are we ready to vote? Okay, so all those in favor, raise your right hand. I'm sorry? Yeah, to send it to the board. Okay.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. You have just adopted the motion that we recommend to the full Board of Trustees approval of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2020, including a report by the district's external auditors, Weaver and Tidwell LLP, regarding the 2019-2020 fiscal year audit. So the next agenda item, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Is a report on status of the maintenance work order system. Dwayne Thompson.
Good afternoon. So we provided in the packet our management response to the previous audit related to work orders. I would be more than happy to answer any questions that you have, but in the end, we've established our procedures and processes. We've put together a timeline of when we anticipate accomplishing the goal, and at the end, the goal would be to have routine work orders not exceed a 15-day average for completion. So I'm not going to go through every page of that with you unless you have specific questions on each one, but I will answer any questions you have. I also have Dino and David Bates here to answer any questions as well.
Okay. Trustees, any questions? Trustee Johnson?
What was causing the delay on the work project, the work orders?
Well, we needed to review our processes of how we analyzed our work orders and prioritize those. And so that's what we've done. We've scheduled meetings as far as timeframes to identify the work orders that are delayed and why they're delayed and how we can address those. So those things weren't, we were beginning to implement those, but we haven't implemented at the time that the review was done. And so now we've got those in place and we've begun to reduce the work orders percentages. We've got on our schedule for 25% by the middle of December. We're already at 21%. So we've already put those into place so we can meet our goal.
Edwin, I have a
Trustee Foreman?
question.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Trustee Foreman.
Thank you. Dwayne, how long have we used School Dude?
I'm sorry, Trustee Foreman, I don't know the exact length of time, but probably
Years,
several years.
several years.
Many years, as old as dude as I am.
That's what I know, and that's why I'm asking the question. Because we've been using School Dude for years, and it doesn't seem to have worked for us. So what makes us think it's gonna work now?
In our plan, we're switching that to ServiceNow. We're going to be transitioning away from School Dude to ServiceNow, which is
Okay, and who else is using ServiceNow that makes us believe that's gonna work for us?
right now technology is using that for their orders as well.
Our technology?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I've had some issues with the way some of the things went out through technology. The only reason I'm asking the question the way I am is because if we keep doing the same thing the same way, we're going to keep getting the same results. And I just think that we need to dig a little deeper. Have we put in any policies that will change what we're doing in writing?
Yes, ma'am. Well, as far as board policies, no, but we have an entire packet here of our procedures internally of what we're going to do, who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and how often we're going to do those items, so we can keep on top of our goal to get to the 15-day average, and then be able to maintain that.
So, Dr. Hinojosa, I would strongly suggest that there are periodic reports to the board regarding this. It's one of the biggest issues that we face is maintaining our buildings and making sure that what is needed in those buildings is taken care of. I know for a fact that principals put in orders for maintenance quite frequently and don't get a response. And I think the entire board needs to be brought up to date on what we're doing and how we're doing it and what changes we're gonna make. And then you guys always talk about data. I want to see some data that's going to show me that these schools are getting what they need, particularly at this time.
Trustee Foreman, I agree with your skepticism. I'm skeptical myself. And so Dan Mixkay has also brought it up and almost got on my evaluation instrument. That's not good. So we take it very seriously. We have some new people in place, but I don't dispute your skepticism, and hopefully we can, hope's not a strategy, so we'll be coming back with some results.
And I hope that you will bring this to the full board, not just the audit committee, but the full board needs to be abreast of how this is working and where we are periodically.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trustee Johnson?
I agree with Trustee Foreman to bring it for, before the whole board. I have one other question, was listening to Trustee Foreman. There's some times where it was said that the work orders was complete, but the problem still existed. And this is happening in several of my schools, and it's become like a pattern. So how can we do checks and balances to make sure that that's not happening? Outside of the custodians placing the work order in, or the principals placing the work order in, and it's still taking two months. I know you say you got to come up with a new system, but how can we make sure that things are actually being taken care of?
Right, so part of our review process will be to identify those items that are reoccurring, that we've indicated that we've addressed, but they're still an issue, so we need to find out why it's still continuing on, whether it's a water leak or it's a whatever the case may be, so we can see those repeat items at the same campus over and over again and why that hasn't been corrected. But back to Trustee Foreman's comment, I get a weekly update of where we are, and so it'd be very easy for me to translate those into a board update item that you can see in our progress, because we want to be diligent in our expectations on the percentages and getting down to that the ultimate goal. And so the only way we can do that is be able to produce information and provide that. So we'll be doing that in the board update for sure.
Thank you.
Trustees, any other questions? Any questions? So I'll just add to on that you know, what you don't measure doesn't change, and what you measure publicly changes faster. And so if it's a very, you know, apparent, you know, monthly report or something that shows up in our board update, that's to me, very transparent what's going on, and everybody knows what's happening and if it's moving in the right direction or not. And you know, I don't know, at some point we were working on dashboards a few years ago, and I don't know if those still exist or not, but you know, that's the kind of thing that could end up on a dashboard, so we're continuously knowing what it's looking like, and then the public can know what it's looking like. So we appreciate the focus on this. I know you got a great team. I know Dino and David do a great job, and you know, they're moving mountains. This has been an issue for a while, having been a school board member now for almost 13 years, over 2 different episodes. So I know that. So we appreciate your focus on it, and I know that the kids in our schools welcome, you know, listening to me talk about back in 2005 when I started on the school board. But no, thank you, Dwayne, and I agree with my fellow trustees on this. Thank you. Okay, that was a report. So then, we're going to move on to E, which is consider and take possible action to accept and make final internal audit reports. And this time, I guess we'll do the reports first, and then I'll take the motion in the second, if we move to adopt them. Or do you want, what do
Point
you
of
want?
information, Mr. Chair, I believe we also need to have the closed session before we act on this, because one of these is a closed session item. So we may want to start there,
Do you want to start with the,
unless you want to do it in the middle of the item. It's up to you.
you want to do closed session first? Looks like the way everybody wants to do closed sessions first. So we'll do the closed session first, which is going to be, so I have to read the script on the closed session. So, because one of the reports does have to be in closed session. So the board will now retire to closed session. The public and staff are welcome to stay connected to Zoom while the board leaves the meeting to attend the closed session. The public portion of the meeting will resume after closed session. The board will retire to closed session pursuant to the Texas Government Code Section 551 concerning any and all purposes permitted by the Act, including but not limited to the following sections. Texas Government Code Sections 551.071 to seek the advice of its attorney after pending or contemplated litigation. 551.074 to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee. 551.076 to deliberate regarding the security devices or security audits. 1, the deployment or specific occasions for implementation or security personnel or devices, or a 2, security audit. So the time is now 4:39, and we are in closed session. Do we have an idea of what kind of estimate?
We'll do our part in 10 minutes, but I don't know how long it'll take you with your questions.
Okay, so we'll be back.
30 minutes.
Okay, it is now 5:11, and we are back in open session. The board took no action in closed session, so now we'll go back to the reports.
Yes, sir.
Alan?
We have a total of 7 reports for you to consider tonight, and I thought I'd just kind of go through it rather quickly and just leave most of it up to you for asking questions. The first report we have to consider is the Edgar Report. The Edgar Report, we had 3 findings, and those have all been presented to you. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to try to address them.
Trustees, any questions? Trustee Foreman, Trustee Mitchcase, Trustee Foreman back on? Okay. Okay, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I have one.
Oh, go ahead,
Just a
Trustee
quick
Marshall.
one, Alan. All the items on this report seem to have been agreed to and handled, or have a plan for handling from from management. So
Yes, sir. There didn't seem to be any issues with getting these issues resolved. I think we're in good shape, and, we'll address it on the follow-up report and let you know the status of implementation of these 3 items.
yeah, okay, great, thanks.
The next report is a CMAR report. This is an interim report. We wanted to get this to you. We have Rich Townsend here who can come up and address any questions that you may have. Basically, we had 4 findings on the CMAR report. If you have any questions, Rich will be glad to address them.
What are the findings?
Well, the first one was we had contract revisions that we needed to make to ensure the general conditions and self-perform work was correct. The second one was in the RFP process for the Step 2 process on CMAR. We also had to address the CMAR. The third one, there's no written procedures in place for the CMAR practice. And the fourth one was
Teaming agreements.
teaming agreement issues.
What was the problem with the teaming agreement?
Very good. Yeah, so I'm Rich Townsend. The proposals that got attached to the teaming agreement, there really wasn't anything fundamentally wrong with the teaming agreement that the ISD did have, but the proposals that the teaming partners were submitting into the CMARs had compensation terms in there that didn't align with the contract that the district wanted to have in place, the A133, the main CMAR contract, which provides for them to be reimbursed on actual cost of labor burden, makes things auditable. And let's see, the other thing was the expectation of them bidding the work to actually have to bid whatever work they were going to do and be best value. And since they're a partner, for example, 3I is a teaming partner for Beck under the contract that's being anticipated for TJ Carey. And so them working together was all good and the contract was good. It was just the way it was put together was before DISD had decided to go with the clarifications in the A133 contract, which makes it where you'll pay a better amount, a more fair amount to the contractors, fees, et cetera.
Can you give me that information? Can you email that to me?
Trustee Johnson, say again?
Can you email that to me? Can you get that information?
Absolutely, yes,
Yes,
sir. We get
yes.
that to you.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, I think, did we not get a corrected contract today?
That's right. Legal just circulated a revised teaming agreement draft that looked very good. It got all the terms in alignment with, what the A133 anticipated to reimburse the CMAR, and basically it brings their team partner under the same terms. And looked like they've got that fixed. And that's what we were talking about.
Edwin.
Please.
And I apologize if this question takes us too far, but can you give me a little background as far as what led to the decision to go to the CMAR process as as opposed to the process that was used before?
No is the answer to that question.
I did study it though, yeah.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question again?
There's
Yeah.
months,
Can you
if not
ask the
years,
question
of
one more
political background.
Say it again?
Will you please ask your question one more time?
Okay, I'm sorry. So I guess I would just want to know a
wanted
little
the history.
background. Yeah, a little history of moving to the CMAR process as opposed to the competitive seal proposal process. And if that's a loaded question, then I'll withdraw that and we can continue to move.
That may be an hour-long question. There's been
Okay.
a lot of history around that.
Okay.
Go look at them board meetings.
Okay.
It's
And our report did address that a little. We basically said, the board had approved using this method, which is one of the things you've set up to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's mainly CSP unless you approve something different, which you were the board approved.
Okay.
These 4 contracts, three projects mainly, to be
Okay.
done under. Usually it's when you want to go faster, fast track, you want to get something done sooner than the conventional. So that's why CMAR is, some people will elect that if they say, well, if we went traditional, we might spend a year to design it, and you can't start construction until you get the design done and go out and bid it. But theoretically, if you hire the CMAR and the architect at the same time, they partner up, then they can go fast track, do some of the early trades, excavation, et cetera, while the design is being finished on the rest of the building. So that's typically the main reason why they do it. There's other reasons. but
Okay.
That's the big one.
But I disagree with that, but that's fine.
Well, yeah.
Did any of your assessment or your interview, did you assess, do we have the, staff with the skill set and the competencies to effectively, oversee this new procedure or to implement it?
Since DISD hasn't done a lot of these in recent time, I know, like Mr. Smith, Don Smith, has some experience doing that. The people that work for Dikita Veneer, some of their people have managed it. But yeah, you're not real deep on people that have managed these sort of things. Now, everybody that I work with basically understands the business well enough, and I'm confident that you can put together a team that will be able to effectively manage these things. They do, if you don't watch them, and that's one of the big things we did in the report and the findings that Mr. King mentioned. We helped get the best practice clauses in there that should help you get a better value and keep the CMARs from taking advantage of you. So that's what we addressed. But yeah, I think you're on your way to getting where you want to be. But it'll take time.
Thank you.
It'll take time.
I would like to add.
Trustee Johnson?
I would like to add, speaking with Mr. King, CSP is better for the board. It keeps the board more in control of what's going on. So, he's the expert. I know he supports both, but it's better for the board. So I would like to say that. Okay.
Trustee Marshall?
Yeah, so this audit has been a little bit unique in the sense that as we've been signing up, kind of getting started on these couple of CMAR projects, you guys have been doing the audit at the same time and have been giving feedback to the administration on the language in the contract and how it needs to be changed prior to us actually executing it, correct?
Yes, sir. Well, I was really worried about crossing that line between internal audit and administration because we were really telling them how the contract should be written.
So for the first couple of findings here, it's kind of old news in the sense that it's already been fixed.
Pretty
right?
much the only thing that hasn't been fixed really is, since we got the teaming agreement solved today, then the only thing that seems to be outstanding is there's no written procedures and processes in place for CMAR.
Okay, because one of the things that concerned me on the last 3 pages of this document were management's responses lacked the estimated completion date. Management said they agreed with all 4 findings, but then when asked when they were going to fix it, the date field was left blank, which for items 1, 2, and 4, you're pointing out that they've already been fixed. So,
Yes, sir, that's correct, is it not?
okay, so that begs the question for item 3, when we can expect management to have completed executing against that recommendation.
I don't have the answer to when they're going to get it done.
Yeah, I wasn't asking you, Alan, don't
Oh,
worry.
you look at that.
Yeah, we should have that finished by the start of next school year, so I would say by August. We're just developing taking those recommendations and going through it. So we've been working on this process, we just haven't completed it yet.
Okay, so how does that dovetail with the timing of the CMAR contracts for TJ and STEM and what's the third one?
It was West M, Dallas, TJ, and Career Institute North.
Yeah.
So we
Career
have
Institute,
contracts
that's right.
for Career Institute North, we have contracts for TJ, and now on the board agenda for this coming up night meeting will be the contract for West Dallas STEM.
Right, but part of finding 3 is around having structured oversight of CMAR construction activity. So waiting till August to have that in place when projects are up and running now is problematic.
No, it's not to wait till August, we will complete the overall manual by then, but we have processes in place, we just don't have them in writing, and that's what we're in the process of doing. So if
Do you guys agree with that statement?
I'm going to let Rich answer that.
From all the discussions that I had with the team members from Nikita Veneer and Don Smith's group at procurement, et cetera, the process that they've been following, like I say, it's not all written down as was just discussed, but they have the fundamentals and they know what they need to do. I talked with the internal audit department and management along the way that sort of having internal audit or someone like them being involved in partnering with management to kind of make sure things are going the way you would want, best practice, just like we did when we got involved here. We said, whoa, here's a couple things you probably want to fix right away. So as you get into this, basically working with them to, like, for example, GMPs are going to be submitted by Beck soon, before the end of the year. Part of our audit plan scope is to include our review from an auditing standpoint of those GMPs, work with management to make sure that some of the classic mistakes, our company basically audits CMAR contracts all over the country and a lot of school districts here in Texas exclusively. So we know what the tricks are the contractors do.
Let me ask you the question a different way. On recommendation 3 on pages 7, 8, and 9 of the document, you have A through Q of specific things that should be codified in the written procedures.
Yes, sir.
Those A through Q things seem to me, when you get into the weeds and read through them, to be prerequisites for success on the TJ, West Dallas, and Career Institute North projects, which are already underway. So regardless of whether those things have been written down, are you sufficiently satisfied that items A through Q are actually being handled by the management team, even if they don't have written processes in place to reflect how they're handling them?
That's a good question. Well, some of it, I don't know the answer because I haven't seen what they're going to do. For example, a big thing is when subcontractors are going to be bidding the job, the code requires them to advertise, the CMAR to advertise, bids to come in, who's going to take the bids, how they're going to be awarded, how they're going to be analyzed. I haven't seen how the district has done that because they haven't done any of that yet. I didn't look at what happened with CORE. That was something Mr. King handled, but so how they're going to do it. But the way they described it is we're going to have bids come in to the district. They'll open them. They'll be involved in the opening. So I'm confident that they have the right plan in place for that. I just haven't seen it because it hasn't happened yet.
Okay. Thanks.
Trustee Foreman, do you have any questions? Then I'll come back.
I do, and thank you for asking me. Dr. Lear, could you make sure that I get a copy of this report because I don't have it?
Yes, ma'am.
But I do have some questions regarding the whole CMAR process and this conversation, not even looking at the report.
Hey, Joyce,
So-
just for your reference, this was sent to you on 11/6 at 12:16 p.m. It's a
I
Word
don't,
email.
sorry, I don't see it. I don't have it. So you can say it's sent. If I don't have it in my hands, I don't have it. And so let me continue with my questions if you don't mind. Part of that has to do with, stop ringing phone. The question is that I thought I understood you to say that there were no written policies and procedures in place. But we've gone forward with CMAR spending hundreds of millions of dollars. Is that correct?
The question is,
Are there
hundreds of
written
millions of
policies
dollars
and
to be spent.
procedures
Yeah,
in
you have the
place?
project we put in the report, about $186 million of anticipated spend with CMAR contracts. That's what's in the report for the 4 projects that you mentioned. And
So I thought the Career Center in North Dallas was about $100 million.
Yeah, but we haven't spent the money. That's
Then
the
you
budget.
have the TJ, and then you have the West Dallas STEM. Is that correct?
that's right. In fact, let me go over the breakdown that I am aware of. And these numbers are subject to change because they were budget numbers that administration used and procurement used. But Beck gave you a proposal to do TJ and Carey for a total of $113 million budget, but that's all subject to design that's going on right now, subject to change and approval by the board. The next project is the Walnut Hill Career Institute. That's $49 million anticipated spend for the CMAR there. And then did I say STEM? No, Career Institute was $49 million. STEM was $24 million spend. That's not the whole budget because the rest of the budget that you have is for your soft costs, architect, program management fees, et cetera. And so
again, we're somewhere in the $200 million range for schools or projects for CMAR, with no particular policies and procedures, written policies and procedures in place.
Okay, so that's a good question. And the answer, you do have written policies. You have board policies that cover at a high level how things are supposed to work. It follows Texas code, which are the basics on how you're supposed to procure. So you do have policies on that, and you're following all that.
I'm specifically speaking about CMAR.
Well, you do have a policy for CMAR and how CMAR is supposed
Do
to
we
work.
have procedures in place? So you said one thing and now you're backtracking on it, and I'm
Well,
going to keep going.
These were specific, what we recommended in the report, that you didn't have procedures for the process of handling, like the bidding, all the items that I itemized in the report.
That is
There were not
correct.
written procedures on
Okay,
that. So
okay,
it's
good.
like you have a procedure manual, if you will, that will spell out how the whole team will work together. That's what you didn't have. You do have practices, and you do have, you've been using, what people typically use, but not a formal procedure manual, which is what Chief Thompson addressed.
Okay, so you continue to talk about Dequita Veneer in terms of CMAR. Dequita Veneer has worked with us on CSP. So when you were talking about CMAR, you continued to say Dequita Veneer and they knew how that worked. Well, in most cases, Dequita Veneer will not be on a CMAR project because that's the reason you do CMAR, to keep those kinds of companies out. And the management is done by the company that you do the CMAR with. Is that correct?
Nope.
Can you ask the question again at the end, please?
I'm just trying to see if I'm correct, because I kept hearing Dequita Veneer as a company that was working on CMAR, and they've done CSP for us. Is that correct?
That is correct. Historically, they were hired for I don't know how long, but I know for the 2015 bond program. So that mostly all you were doing then was CSP projects up until recently. And Dequita Veneer was your program manager to help you manage those. And but some of the same people there have been called upon to work with the DISD staff to on Thomas Jefferson School in particular. So I know there's a man, Joe Sweat is his name, from Dequita Veneer, and he's very knowledgeable, I can tell, and you know, managing the process is as good as we've seen. So
the only thing I'm saying is we keep mixing apples and oranges, and we don't keep dealing with the real issue of the problems that we have with CMAR. Part of it is because we haven't done many CMAR projects before, and we keep struggling trying to get it right. But I'm going to be interested in seeing that report, because there's also a risk with CMAR. It is not a guaranteed maximum amount, and you probably know that because they can do change orders to go through this whole process. And so as we put those procedures in place, I want to see how we're going to do that. And then I am interested in the change. What change did we make in the teaming agreement between Beck and 3I? When I look at the management fee that Beck charges compared to the management fee that CORE was charging, it's almost twice as much. So I'm interested in looking at that teaming agreement to ensure that it doesn't hinder the small company in this process. So what did we change in the teaming agreement?
So, well, the teaming agreement that the district put together that will go through back and really doesn't change much of anything. It's the same structure for them to work as was proposed, to work in partnership with Beck. They'll be hired to manage certain amounts of the work and help manage the overall. And actually, Beck is paying them out of their fee. Basically, the fee that 3I will get is the same fee. So you don't pay any more money, any more fee to have 3I be a partner there than you would otherwise. So now we'll have to watch what they turn in when they turn in their guaranteed maximum price on how that's all going to work together. That will be the next critical step to controlling costs relative to those deals. But there won't be any more fee that you would pay by having 3I work with them. The way the deal is structured, as I understand it right now.
Are you saying in the teaming agreement before that there was an additional fee for 3I to work with Beck?
No additional fee. That's what you didn't review that, did you?
No, he said it would not be an additional fee now.
Yeah, Trustee Foreman, this is the way I understand the deal. Beck proposed to work for the district for 2.5% fee, somewhere in that range. I don't remember the exact number, but it's something like 2.5% fee. And out of that fee, it was agreed between Beck and 3I that 3I would help them manage approximately $20-some million worth of contract work, MEP work, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. They will provide the staff, which Beck would have to have if they didn't have 3I helping them, Beck would have to have their own people do the work that 3I is going to do as management. And then 3I is going to get paid a fee out of Beck's fee for them to manage that work. So it seemed like a fair, it's basically the deal that 3I proposed, and we didn't change that. The main thing that was changed you asked about was and let me give you the background on the one major deal. Self-performed work by a construction manager. Some school districts don't allow them to do self-performed work, and that'll be a decision that would be made. But self-performed work, they will have to bid it, and the teaming partners will have to bid whatever work that they might be doing. And then that would be reimbursed on a open book, cost plus fee basis with a not to exceed. So it's much better for you than having a CSP, hard bid contract that I could go on for a good while about some of the abuses that happen if you don't have this sort of thing in your contract. So it's a best practice we've implemented. So it should help and be fair to everyone. So
Dwayne, I thought the agreement with Beck was 5.9, not 2.5.
The dollar amount you're referring to is including all costs, which included general conditions and their fee. I put that into an entire cost estimate that would come to that percentage, but what he's referring to is only the fee only.
So you saying
Correct.
it's the fee plus what?
It's the 2.5% fee or whatever the fee percentage is, plus general conditions, plus pre-con. So you asked for the total cost. I gave you the total cost of what is estimated on this project and put that in the form of a percentage.
So trustee Foreman, I think we've exceeded the 10 minutes and trustee Johnson still has some questions.
Oh, I'm sorry, because I could go on and on.
Trustee Johnson?
You said it wasn't, and you may have answered this a few minutes ago, but I just want to, because a lot of other stuff was answered.
absolutely.
Why was it not written down?
What was not written down, sir?
With the teaming agreement, you said something was not written down?
No, if I said that, I misspoke.
Okay.
The teaming agreement that I first saw, so Beck gave the district a proposal on September 1st.
I got that.
Before I got hired, right?
Right.
And it had a teaming agreement that basically had some compensation rates for equipment and labor and things that didn't line up with the way the district should be hiring.
I think you said something was said, but it wasn't written down. You remember that?
Something with fee that wasn't,
We'll go back and I'll review it and I'll ask you.
okay, great.
Because I guess it was something on the West Dallas School. So what, is everything going accordingly with the contract between, I guess, the West Dallas School, or was it the STEM school, or was it the Pinkston School?
Okay, so West Dallas,
We have two
yeah, West
schools.
Dallas STEM
Yes.
is the $24 million project. And right now, that one just finished going through procurement and their selection process. So no CMAR has been hired yet on that one, but they were actively in the procurement process, since when we started.
You said it's a $24 million project?
24 million is the amount of money the procurement put in their documents when they said this is the construction budget, the CMAR budget for this job. Yes, sir.
Because I got a document that says 30 million.
That should be the whole budget with soft costs and other things, exactly. And that may have contingency in it. I don't exactly know,
We can talk
some of
offline.
those, yeah. But there are other numbers out there that vary. So I use the numbers in my report there in the total, and what I've talked about tonight, that were used by procurement in the documents that went to the CMARs. So
We can sit down, talk together offline, and get a good understanding.
be great. Thank you.
I want to make sure I get everything that I need for my community and my kids.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
And I might add, this is an interim report, and right now, we're just focused on the contracts
Yes, sir.
and the written procedures. And the next phase, we're going to be focusing on the actual GMPs that are coming in. We haven't looked at that. We're working on that as part of his fee. He's also supposed to write up an audit program for us to use to audit those GMPs. So this is kind of just phase one. We got a long way to go.
I'll just email, call you.
Thank you.
Okay, so then moving on to the other reports, do we want any questions on the other reports?
Thank you, everyone.
No, thank you, appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Good night.
Appreciate
Thank
you
you.
looking at this and following up with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Alan, any other, which was the other?
The next report we had was the inventory report. We had 5 findings on inventory issues. 3 of those findings were related to transportation. 1 was food service and 1 was warehouse. Any specific questions, we'd be glad to address.
Trustees, any questions? Trustee Marshall?
So I'm just going through your risk levels here and your recommendations. So finding 1 you said was high risk, but the administration agreed and said they would implement that by December of 2020. So, and then the only other high risk one on here is finding 3, which is the one that the administration disagreed with, right? So can you walk us through in detail what finding 3 is and why the management disagrees with it?
Can't tell you why they disagreed with it,
That's a
but there's,
two-part question, and you're
there's
just in charge of part 1.
there's a form, of course, you also, when you look at the form, they're really, district-wide, they're not, the district is, this is not really in the report, but they're not consistent with how they're disposing of old assets. And even this form, they're calling it decommission of equipment. That's not the form they're actually using. So when you, my question with staff is really, is it worth the time to effort to even track this stuff that we're not using in these parts inventory? But, management didn't address that either. So, but the main thing is there's a form they're supposed to be using. There's a form they say they're supposed to be using for decommission of parts, and they're not doing it in a proper fashion.
Okay, so what about that does management disagree with? Dino, what are you doing on that side of the table over there?
Yeah, I know. I'll be right back. Trustee Marshall, I think what we're talking about is the way that Mr. King was alluding to, the way that we handle I call them our defective parts, that we didn't really have a good, clean process for that on the transportation side of the house. And so I think Audit was calling it decommission, but what we have are in some instances, low-cost items that when they are shipped from the warehouse, we lose visibility out of Oracle. And the only time that they're out there in the field is when they receive them. And so when we have to return, let's say, a battery or something like that, there's a form that's filled out called a P1B. That form is filled out, but it is outside of the inventory process, and so it becomes a manual process. And so you really don't know how much obsolescence or excess that you have out there that's trashed. And so what Mr. King is probably saying is that some of those things are probably not high enough in cost that you want to track those, but we just have to have a better process. So when we do ship something, if we're going to what I call expense it, that we have a better way of tracking that.
So are you looking just in Oracle and saying that when something reaches the end of its useful life, you can't discern that in Oracle because there's no flag for that or no data field
No, I mean,
for that?
really, they have a procedure in place where they're supposed to fill out a form whenever they decommission these parts, and they're not completing the form correct. So, I mean, it's
But
as
you're
simple
saying
as
there's a
that.
different form that isn't the form he's talking about, which is not in Oracle.
Was correct. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dino.
I said there's 2 things, because one, when we Dallas ISD entered into the transportation business, there was no form, there was no process. The form that Mr. King is talking about was actually for the return from campuses and administration building of defective used furniture and equipment. So that's why the form doesn't match what we're talking about here.
Okay, so what's the solution to this? Can we take the form you're talking about and
It doesn't
match them up? I mean, what am I missing here? This seems
they
easy to
just,
solve.
management needs just decide how they want to handle it. To me, if it's not even a material item, I wonder if it's even worth the cost of tracking. So, we put the finding down. They got to determine what they think's the best way to handle it. And
So why is this classified as a high risk then? Because what you're describing, if it's so cheap, it can be chucked without.
some of them can and some of them aren't. Some of the items are really cheap, not worth tracking. Some of them are not.
Okay, so for the expensive items that are worth tracking, are you planning to implement
Right.
some sort of form or process that?
Right. What we need to do is create a return material authorization So basically, when we ship something from a warehouse, we're able to track it, but then when the service centers receive it, they know that this is a returnable item. Today, they don't really know that when an item is returnable, so we just need
Okay,
to.
so it sounds to me like you actually do agree with the finding. You're just having a semantic discussion about which form is applicable and whether or not what the form he wants you to fill out is the one you're filling out.
Right, because Mr. King he didn't care if we fill out a form.
Yeah,
just
he
wants-
doesn't give a damn what
Right.
form it is. He just wants,
really
he
don't.
just wants to be able to track it.
We just
through
need
the
to
end
track,
of
correct.
completion, which you're gonna do.
Correct.
All right, then I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Trustees, any other questions? Trustee Foreman, any question?
No, I'll let Dino ride this time.
Dino.
The next report we have is the audit of the superintendent's expenses, and we didn't have any issues there. The next one is the audit of Barack Obama Activity Fund. We had 6 findings. The findings are listed there. The next audit was a physical security audit. When we do,
I have a question on the 5th one. Can we stop there for just a second?
yes, sir.
These findings that you have for Barack, I mean, they're obviously unique to Barack Obama, but these seem to be the same things that are happening in campuses all over the place whenever you do an activity fund audit. So is that just because, like, as out of ease of, delegation, the principals are giving more control to the office manager than they should, and, that they have sort of more authority than they they deserve? I mean, what's causing this, and how do we fix it? Because we seem to, these are not big, major things, and it's not significant dollars, but it seems to be a pervasive finding that every time we look at a different school's activity fund, that these are the same things that come up. That's more of a management question. Yeah.
So we continue to look at, all these items. We provide training to the staff as to how to process. We have internal audit, not internal audit as in the department, but within the division, our folks go out and are reviewing these, reviewing the campuses and the transactions. So, it's, I don't know if I can ever get to a point where every time there's a review of an activity fund that there won't be any exceptions. But we can be more diligent, and try to go out more often to the campuses. But
I'd encourage you to think about what we can do differently, because, whatever training we're doing, it's the same things that we hear every time we do an activity fund audit at a different school. So, I don't know who it was that said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, we got to change what we're doing here. So I hope you'll be proactive about, I don't know if it's changing the training or, improving enforcement or some IT solution to it. I don't know what the bells and whistles are that we need to put around this, but, it just seems the same thing every time. So I'll leave you with that.
Mr. Lewis?
Okay, can you speak to a little bit the concerns that was expressed by the new principal coming in that requested this review? And also, if speak to what's the next phase of the project. It may look like if there's any further investigation warranted if there was some malfeasance that took place.
Bob, you want to handle that?
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Bob Rubel, Deputy Chief. So the principal made calls to us and emails concerned about activity funds. He took over. General understanding here is that, that they didn't have combination to the safe. Money was being stored outside the safe. He expressed the concern to us about, password, a former principal's password. So we become concerned. We go out, talk to them, visit, start looking at documentation. That would be our normal procedure. Operational auditing versus, we're concerned about maybe a small theft or fraud occurring. We will do our work and make recommendations. We'll turn over these reports when we feel there might be administrative action that should be taken to PSO, Professional Services Group, and they will look at it and then do additional interviews. If they violated certain policies of the school, they have the ability then to make corrective action or make corrective action recommendations. And they do this, every day. It's part of handling hundreds of hotline calls that come into the district to do their investigation to ensure employees are following the proper procedures. So we feel like we've closed the loop with PSO on it. And when a principal expresses a concern, we're going to go find out, what those concerns are. It might not be us to handle it. It might be another department, but we're going to provide that service best we can.
Just to clarify, though, just because of the nature of the way the question was asked, you didn't find any malfeasance or any fraud, waste, or abuse here. You just found some procedural, cash handling processes that were lacking controls.
I think that's correct.
You think?
No, we did not find any fraud.
Okay.
What we did.
That's a question that has to be given a definitive answer.
Yeah. What we did find was, when possible misuse of a password. So that was turned over to PSO for further investigation.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And I will add that what might help too, and it might hurt, but we've got 30 of these activity funds scheduled and hope to have them to complete before the next audit committee. So if we start making these rounds a little more frequently, maybe the principal pay a little more attention too.
Yeah, that'd probably help.
So we are going to do that. And while we're out there, we're doing these physical security audits. So you'll notice that we go out there, we do an activity fund audit, and then when we do a physical security audit while we're there. And on this particular school, we didn't have any issues on the physical security audit too.
So point of information for the chair, in the past, the physical security audits have been handled in closed session. This one obviously had no issues, so it's no problem for it to be in the public. But I think in the future, these items should not be on the public agenda.
Since we didn't have an issue, that's why we just left it there.
Okay. Thanks.
So I only got 6 minutes left. Right?
Yeah.
Is that for me?
Yeah, that's for you. That's it. That's it. That's all that's left in the meeting. We're running out of time. Trustee Foreman or Mitch K., any questions?
So the last audit we did, of course, I highlighted number 6, but the last audit we have for you to consider is a purchasing audit. Basically, we had 8 findings on that. We hired Rick Coulter as a consultant to help us with this audit. And, our findings are listed here. If you have any specific questions, we'll be glad to try to address them.
Trustees, any questions on this one?
I have lots of questions, but I think it would be more productive for this one to actually talk through the findings than start with questions. So I don't know how you can consolidate that and do it.
Well, I'll just start off and try to do it for what we did is we took all the board docs that you reviewed during the last fiscal year, or during a 1-year period. So we looked at every board doc regarding a purchase that was issued last year. That's what we looked at. And, by law, when you look at a bid, there's 9 criteria you're supposed to look at. And we've divided it into 3. One of them is price, one of them is NWVE, and the other 7 criteria are basically evaluations of vendor performance by team members. So finding number 1, this is what we found is that when you looked at all the bids last year, what was driving our recommendations was these evaluations of vendors by the team. So on 65% of the bids that you looked at and approved last year, that evaluation criteria on a 100-point scale received more points than MWBE and price combined. So nothing wrong with that. That's just how you're doing it. So when you're looking at your bids, you pay more, you're valuing your bids more based on vendor performance evaluations than price and MWBE. So our recommendation on that is maybe you need to look at fixing the price to a certain level. So that was kind of our first finding. Finding number 2, when we looked at those bids, only 45% of the bids could be tied to a purchase from a best value vendor. And that's even given credit to vendors where you only had 2 bids. For example, Pinkston, you only had 2 bids. So that's kind of giving you credit for that. So 45% of the purchases you made last year could be tied to best value as defined by the district. And remember, they have those 9 criteria. So only 45% of those were tied to best value. And
Yeah. Can I just restate that sentence? So you're saying by our own evaluation criteria, baking in all 9 items, of which price and MWE are 2, and there's 7 more that are service related. Using our own criteria, we are scoring everybody, coming up with the number 1 ranked bidder, and then only choosing that number 1 ranked bidder 45% of the time?
we could only identify that 45% of the time.
What is that? What is that caveat you just said?
Well, the whole problem with this category, and we've talked about it, and this is kind of why we moved this audit up, is all the other audits we've looked at, purchasing is the root of the issue. Like, for example, if you're a classroom teacher and you want to go buy teaching supplies, you got a choice of 250 vendors. So when these classroom teachers or these principals or somebody go look at those 250 vendors, they're not buying from the number 1 ranked bidder. And then when you go to the co-ops, when you have X number of contracts through the co-ops are not necessarily best value as determined by you, because the co-ops have their own standard for determining best value. So those are the 2 factors driving why we can't tie the remaining 55% to best value. But also, when you go look at our charts, you can see where we went, and we tracked about 20 different bids, and we tracked all the purchases, and you can see, we didn't go with the number 1 ranked bidder. So that will be finding number 2.
But those are dispersed decision-making bids, right? Like that's the example of a teacher making their own individual decision from a list of approved vendors with a small dollar amount of a purchase is very different than us buying $100 million in desks all at once with a central single decision maker within the district. So with those,
we could also, let's take it on a simpler scale. Let's take tires, that's pretty big ticket item. So you got tires. I think you had 3 vendors for tires, and you went to the highest ranked vendor most of the time. You didn't go with your best value most of the time on tires.
highest ranked meaning worse.
The worst bid according to your criteria. And you can scroll through the charts, and you can see which bids we looked at, and tires was in there, just happened to be one we looked at. So it's not just that, it's just you're not buying from best value as determined by your own criteria. And it keeps coming up, we've talked about it before, all these other audits. So that would be kind of finding number 2 and finding number 3. And then when you go in here and assign points, remember you got a 100-point scale. So when you're assigning points on these bids, we think that issue, you have some issues with the assignment of points. For example, on a 100-point scale, on some bids, you would give 20 points to a vendor because he's done business with you in the past. Well, when you do that, you're kind of limiting competition. And then in some cases, like for example, on the paint bid, I think on the paint bid, you only allowed 20 points on price. Well, paint, why would you only want 20 points on price? You know what I'm saying? So there are a lot of bids like that. So when we listed all, it's a multi-page report. We listed all the issues on there. Then we put all this emphasis, our bids are driven by vendor evaluations, our team member evaluations of vendors, but we don't have any records to support those decisions. You don't have minutes, you don't have agendas. We saw some of that when we were doing the TJ and Philip May stuff. You don't have minutes, you don't have agendas, so you can't support it. We didn't always find reference forms. So, if we're gonna stick with that criteria, we're gonna have to do a better job on documenting what these evaluation committee members are doing. And also, you had such a wide disparity in scores from these individual team members. It kind of looks like maybe some members didn't have the same information, or you wouldn't have such a wide disparity. But if you don't have minutes or agendas, you can't find out. And we found out when we asked these team members of why they made these decisions, their answer was, I don't know. So you need to kind of work on that documentation a little bit. The quoting process, right now we're quoting, and I don't have the number right, I can go look it up, but we're quoting requisitions or purchase orders between $10,000 and $50,000. That's not being done by purchasing, that's being done at the campus level. It's really not worth our time and effort to do that. The campuses or other teams aren't trained to do that. They're not trained purchasing officials. Why take that risk? Very small amount. Let's spend our time on looking at these bigger purchases. So we're recommending that you change that policy. And there's still a few issues in the Weaver and Tazewell report which haven't been addressed that they're working to address.
So first, we've gone through 8 different audit reports today, and I know this is the last one, so I just want to start by saying that I think the quality of the audit reports that we've received this go-round has been the best since I've been on the audit committee, which is several years, so I want to commend you and your team for pulling together some really good work, and doing so in a way that's easy for us to digest without, spending days and weeks reading your reports, although I will say it took me all day to read all of these reports. So with that, this one is certainly the most concerning one we've talked about today, and probably the most concerning one we've talked about all year. There's a lot of problems that have, as you mentioned, kind of bubbled up on other audits that now I feel like are sort of being summarized here in a way that's concerning. And I would say most of my concern, there's a lot of concern I have just from the findings, but a lot of my concern arises from management's responses to those findings. It's been a while since I've seen an audit where almost all the findings were disagreed with by management. And I would characterize the response, at least the written version of the response from management, as fairly defensive. And I'm concerned that there is not more of a willingness to acknowledge where there's opportunities for improvement and to act on those. So I'm hoping that my reading of the management's response and the characterization of it that I just gave is somehow wrong. So I'm going to pause and give you the floor, Dwayne, to call up whoever you want to explain to me why the tone of the response is so defensive and and why you guys are in such disagreement with the findings from this audit.
Well, as we look through the responses, there's a couple things that, and I don't know which one we want to refer to, but there are certain things that are in there as far as they requested, or one of the findings was to change our scoring structure on how we calculate the price, which we already did in July. So there's a different calculation on scoring on how we compare prices between submittals. So we have in fact already done that, even though it's reflected here.
So remind us what changes we made.
Okay, so in the past, the way it would work is you take the high bid minus the low bid, and whatever percentage that was would be reduced from the overall score that was assigned. So it was 40 points, and I was 4% away. I would get 40 minus 4, so I'd get 36 points as the. But what was happening was those percentages based on the size of the bid may be significant in dollar amount. So we did an escalating. Implemented an escalating, so if you're between 0 and 1%, it is the actual percentage. If you're between 1 and 2%, then it goes to 2 times that amount, then 3 times, then 4 times, then 5 times. So as you look at the bids that you're now getting at the board table, you'll see several vendors and potentially that have 0 points for price. And the rationale for that is that they were more than the percentage away from the low bid to earn any points. And the idea was to make price more significant in the overall evaluation of all the criteria. So that's something we implemented. One of the things that we've also heard before is...
Before he goes on, can I talk about that just a second while we're doing it? So let's take that for example. So you got on one particular bid we looked at, multi-million-dollar bid, you had 4 bidders, and only one bidder got any points for price. So you threw that bid out, and then you end up going with a bidder who got no points for price. So,
because of
can't-
the weighting of the other
So
scores.
you gotta have, you gotta have a logical scale. When you have a multi-million-dollar bid, you can have, for every, you ought to do it in scales, like for every $500,000, you get, a point or two, or point or 3 or 4 or 5 points. The percentage thing doesn't work in all cases. Between Rick and I, we've been doing it in Texas for probably over 70 years, and one scale won't work on all bids. So, that percentage thing doesn't work on all bids. So if you have a multi-million-dollar bid, you're going to have to look at awarding points on $500,000 increments, because the way this one bid ended up, you had 4 bids. The one guy that had the best price you threw out, so then you end up awarding the bid to the guy who gets 0 points for price. So that's really that's not a good thing.
So they got thrown out for some other completely different reason.
Somebody else got thrown out. I don't remember why, but they got thrown out. And actually, it also shows up in another area, because they got thrown out. And when you got the board doc, they didn't tell you they weren't going with the number 1 ranked bidder. So you ended up going with somebody that got 0 points.
So I am familiar with that, and the reason why the person that received all the points and why everybody else got 0 is because the person who bid made an error, and so their price was so significantly less than everybody else. Everybody was higher, and so when we went to negotiate with that individual, they acknowledged that they had an error, and so I'm sorry?
They withdrew their bid.
That's correct. Well, they couldn't honor their bid and complete the project as designed, so we went to the person who scored the next highest points with all the other categories, so we went to number 2.
But had you had a scale based on, a sliding scale where, if everybody got points for some sort of prize, you might not have gone with them, because when everybody gets 0 points, you don't know what you're really doing. So you can't have a one size formula fits all. Not gonna work.
Are there other items you want to call attention to that, why you feel that the findings of the audit were not accurate?
Well, I'm not saying that anything's not accurate. What I'm referring to are there things that, for instance, and as we're referring to the first audit comment, or the finding was that the vendor performance should be capped at 30 points. So we're trying to find a balance in there of how we distribute the points, and one of the things that we're trying to make sure that we don't do is we give so much points for price that we don't have enough points left to make a difference if someone is giving poor quality or poor performance. So we've been trying to find balance, and I don't disagree that in some of those bids that the amount for price wasn't too low. I'm not, that's not what I'm disagreeing. I was saying that what we're asked here is just to put it at 30%, and that would make price at 50. And I don't believe that if we have at 30%, we have enough points to be able to make a difference if someone's trying to buy the bid. The second part of that is, if you look in there is a reference to the Weaver audit, which clearly states that in relation to technology, we spent too much time on price and we need to be focused more on quality. So all I'm saying is we're trying to find a balance in there between what, in this case, Weaver said to put more emphasis on the product and the service, and what is being asked of internal audit to put more emphasis on price. So
Dwayne, what's hard for me to understand here is what I'm interested in is what management is going to do differently now that they've seen this audit. And so the way I read the management response to this is primarily a narrative of taking issues with specific observations or the wording of things that the audit department has put in the audit report. And I'm sure we could debate semantic distinctions until we're blue in the face, but what I don't understand after reading the management response is what you're actually going to go do differently and when. So what I would suggest as a next step coming out of this, because this is one that I'd like for the audit committee to be proactively involved in with the chair's consent going forward, and I'd love to see an implementation plan of exactly what you're going to do as a result of this audit, tactically, specifically, and when you're gonna do it, like a project plan that here are the, and I mean, to me, there's probably 50 things that need to be done. So, this is not like one or two items. This is a lot of tactical next steps, and then kind of understand what you're gonna do differently as a result of it. And, I don't think it's this committee's sort of mandate to, proactively manage you guys in that process, but I also want to be assured that there are steps being taken as a result of the audit. And after reading the management's response, I'm not so sure that I feel like there are going to be steps taken. I'll be quiet now.
Well, and if I can, there are other items in here that as we've gone through, we've identified those items that we've already done. And so they're not in our response as in, we're going to do those because we've already implemented it. As we've gone through multiple pools bids for pools, we've begun to separate those out into different categories. We've also begun to make those more specific onto what and you're seeing those in the board documents. So I guess what we've tried to identify is the things that we have done in the process. And so what's left to be done is, for instance, the first one is for the board to set a limit of 30, that will have to come through the ad hoc committee, and that's what we referenced. So there are things that we can do, obviously, and we have done, and we will implement those, but there are also other things that we want to consider as we move forward and to give specific criteria. For instance, and I know your time's up, but as we go through, there's a proposal that we should have at least, we should have at least 3 proposals to consider for the board. There are unique circumstances that, of those proposals, and I've listed some of those, that we can't get 3 vendors. There's also, my concern is on a construction bid, if we get a bona fide bid that meets the criteria and has all the qualifications and is less than the price, is it acceptable for me to not accept that because there aren't 3? I need a legal opinion on that as to whether that's allowable or not, because I personally don't believe that it is, but those are things that we need to work through.
Well,
So
let
are
me
you-
say something on that too while we're talking about it. So, Rick worked with me in Louisville, and if he came to me, we would not go to the board with only one bidder. For example, you had a portable building move where for $5 million, you had one bidder, you authorized that contract for $5 million. That's why we said you have a pre-bid conference, we have a pre-bid conference, you determine vendor interest, you determine what needs to be changed in your specs, and you go out and get other bids. When you have an $80 million for construction for Pinkston, you get 2 bids. That's not right. Dallas ISD, you can get more than 2 bids. Something's wrong, and you shouldn't have accepted that bid, in my opinion. I wouldn't have.
Are you amenable to doing an implementation plan for what the things are that are going to change and when? And thank you for reminding me about the purchasing committee, because that would probably be the better environment to.
Right, and
go through these.
and absolutely I am, and that's what I was
Great.
indicated numerous times, and that we take that to the ad hoc committee.
And I'll work with Alan on a kind of a follow-up, figure out when we can follow up, and if we need to move his resources around a little bit, we can talk about that.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions on any of the other
I have a
reports?
question and a
Trustee
statement
Johnson?
on this. I do agree with Mr. King, because I said I was concerned why I was only 2 bids, I think, on the Pinkston project. That was very alarming and concerning. And it goes along with some of the things that I previously said, probably about a month ago. Second thing is, when we all have the bid that was thrown out, what projects was it on? Is it recent projects or projects before I became trustee, or
It was a project within the last year. I don't recall.
Can you get that information to
Yes,
us?
sir, I can get that to you. I have it written. It's actually in the report. I'll send it to
That you sent to us?
Yes, sir.
Then I'll go back and look at it.
I'll make sure I highlight it.
It was the renovation of the warehouse for Career Institute North, where they are currently.
In the village fair?
No, at Career Institute North, we're
Okay.
renting a warehouse, and the renovations on that was the item referred to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions about any, is that all the reports?
Yes, sir, that's it for tonight.
Okay, well, I still have to, we still haven't taken a motion and a second on this, so I will entertain a motion to accept and make final internal audit reports.
So moved.
Do I have a second? Is there any other discussion on these items? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Okay, it passes unanimously.
Motion passes 3-0. Sorry.
Okay, so we have now adopted the motion to accept and make final internal audit reports. I want to publicly thank Mr. Lewis for joining us on the board. I don't know if you wanted to, I should have done this at the beginning, so I apologize. To ask you to just, maybe say a few words, introduce yourself, and we really appreciate your service along with Ms. Stevens, of course.
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity to serve. My name is Christopher Lewis. I'm a manager of internal audit at American Heart Association, where I've been there going on 15 years, and known Mr. Ruber for a number of years, and highly respect him. Worked with him in collaboration. Was a past president of the Dallas chapter of the Institute of Internal Auditors, where I currently served on the board for that organization as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we really appreciate it very much. And with that, it is 6:15, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.